Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. He's been my fourth man in the fire, time after time. Born of His Spirit, washed in His blood, and what He did for me on Calvary is more than enough. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. Perfect submission, all is at rest, 'cause I know the author of tomorrow has ordered my steps. So this is my story, this is my song, praising my risen King and Savior all the day long. So I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him. That's why I trust Him. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him. That's why I trust Him. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him. That's why I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. I sought the Lord, and He heard, and He answered. That's why I trust Him. That's why I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never fail. oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul rests in your embrace. For I am yours and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you never fail and you won't start now. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours and you are mine. Without borders, let me rock upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith would be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. And I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. Oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours and you are mine.
Well, hey, we are wrapping up a series that we've been in that we've been calling Asking for a Friend. Asking for a Friend by taking a look at biblical answers to, I believe, some of life's biggest questions. And today we're going to be looking at a question that, I got to be honest, I purposely waited till the end to talk about. Not because I didn't know necessarily how to answer it, as much as I really didn't want to answer it. And the reason I say that is because, and I think you'll understand why when I share what this question is that we're going to be tackling, is because the moment I saw it, it just, all the PTSD from science class came flooding back to me. And the question is this, is do God and science contradict? Do God and science contradict? And even though I wasn't necessarily thrilled to have to answer this question, I think it's an important question to deal with and to wrestle with for a couple reasons. One, because you asked for it. This whole series was really laid out and built upon some questions that were asked when we did our Tuesday night Alpha group that wrapped up some weeks ago. And this was one of the questions that was asked, but also because, listen, I think there's a lot of people, and you might be one of them today, who would love to believe in God, right? But there's this kind of quote-unquote rational part to their brain, where it's like when they look at the empirical evidence of life, those things that, like what you can see and what you can hold and what you can touch and what you can hear, right? That because I cannot do those things always with God, as much as I would love to believe in God, there's this rational, empirical part of my brain that says, I'm just having a hard time getting past, right? And listen, if that's you, I think this message is really for you, but it's not just for you. I think it's also for those that are maybe on the other spectrum of that. It's not so much that you come in here looking for reasons to believe in God as much as you're looking for reasons to doubt God. To doubt God, because let's be honest, to recognize and to acknowledge that there's a God in control of all of this. It is also to recognize and acknowledge that I'm not at the center of the universe, that the world doesn't revolve around me, that I was actually created for more than just living life on my own terms and living life for myself. And oftentimes when we're kind of looking for reasons to doubt, it can be really easy to kind of look to science in many ways. Because we think, science, in science, I'm going to find all the reasons to doubt this belief in God. And especially when I'm looking for reasons to doubt him, because, listen, again, I don't, to buy into this ideal that there's a God at the center of it all, and that God's not me. That's really challenging. It's much easier to look to science, where it would try to convince me that everything we see, everything we experience, everything we are just came and showed up by accident. And yet in saying all this, listen, my kind of heart behind sharing this is really to help us to see that science and faith were never meant to contradict each other. They were actually meant to complement each other. As this might surprise you to hear, but the truth is, science is not the enemy that Christians sometimes think it is, and it's also not the evidence that skeptics think it is either. But rather, they're two fields of study looking to answer two very different questions. Because while science tries to answer how many know Scripture is all about answering why? Science answers how seasons change, but science answers, why does life have seasons? Science answers how a baby is made, but Scripture answers why a person is born. Again, they're meant to answer two very different questions. They're not meant to be in opposition of each other. In fact, it would actually be like saying that math and English contradict. Because one deals with numbers, one deals with words. And I would argue that not only do they not contradict, again, they actually complement each other. Like, you ever wrestled through one of those word math problems? Like Mary had 20 lambs. Someone brought 36 more. Someone came and then took 14 away. And then someone else came back and added 7. How many lambs are you left with? I tell some of you are trying to figure it out right now. It's a rhetorical question. I'm just trying to get you to see that faith and science aren't two opposing things. They actually complement each other. They can actually collaborate one another. See, it's not an either or proposition as much as it's a both and. And in fact, to prove this, to just do a quick little experiment to see that not everything in life is an either or, but oftentimes, more often than not, they're both and. And so kind of test this out. I'm going to start off a sentence and see if you can figure out the rest of the sentence. Peanut butter and, all right, good. I'll have Wayne here to say jam, but bacon and, all right, Dallas Cowboys and, correct answer is disappointment. It's been a very disappointing season. Science and God. Yeah, in fact, the more I study science, I don't know about you, but the more in awe of God I actually come away just in reverence of. Like when you study biology, how can you not come away with a greater sense of awe when it comes to this God who created us? Look, have you ever thought about just the complexity of the human eye? Did you know that only the most up-to-date cameras can see in the dark? Only the most up-to-date cameras on your phone can actually blur or unblur, focus and unfocus on objects. Yet how many know the human eye has been doing that for thousands of years? How incredible is that? Again, what a designer, what a creator. Or when you study astronomy, and one thinks about how big the earth is, only to find out how small it actually is in light of the universe. Did you know millions of Earths would actually fit inside our sun? I don't know, but that blows my mind, right? And then to think about the fact that the sun is just the center of our galaxy and that there are countless other galaxies the same size as ours and bigger all over the universe. Or when you study zoology, as recently came across an excerpt from a devotional book by Louis Giglio, and I wish I remember the name of it, but it's all these different devotionals, one for each day of the year, and it's all devotionals around God's creation. And one of those devotions in particular talks about why do birds sing? And it might not be always for the reason that we tend to think it is. Like we tend to think, it's to maybe warn other birds or to communicate to other birds, but there's something in their song, something in their call that actually really perplexes scientists. Like scientists, are all they're studying have never been able to figure out why birds sing. Why birds sing? Like the only reason they can come up with is because it's not for communication. It's not for like they'll sing even when they're alone. And the only answer they can come up with is that they sing for the same reason that we do. Just for the pure joy of singing. Pure joy of singing. Which again, speaking of science collaborating with faith, just reinforces what the psalmist says in Psalm 95. When he says, come and let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let's shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let's come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. Again, how cool is it to know that the birds outside your house have their own worship playlist, right? Even creation sings songs to God. Again, I'm just trying to get us to see that when it comes to science and faith, it doesn't have to be an either or conversation, but rather it can be a both and. Especially when you understand that they support and collaborate each other way more than they are opposing ideals. In other words, it's not that one has faith and the other has facts, because sometimes that's what we think. It's not either or, it's meant to be both and, because listen, before you go thinking, well, I got facts, I got science, that's really all I need. Truth is, how many know you don't have facts, you have theories? That's what science is built upon, is it not? It is built upon theories, where by taking the evidence that's out there, using that evidence to come up with the most likely conclusion. Point being, whether you're a skeptic or believer, at the end of the day, we're all putting our faith into something or someone. We're all putting our faith into something or someone. Like you can say that science knows how the world came into existence, but unless you were there, unless you actually saw it happen, how do you really know for sure? In fact, I love how God speaks to this in Job, this conversation he has with Job, Job 38, 4-7. It says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you know so much, who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundations and who laid its cornerstone as the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? And this is why, again, I say that science and faith, might I add, not only do they collaborate with each other, they actually need each other. They actually need each other. Again, it's not either or, it's a both and, especially given the day and age we live in. As how many know with the advent, especially of like things like AI, like if that's taught us anything, how many know even if you see it, it can be hard to believe and to know what's true and not true these days. Case in point, I got some AI generated images on the screen right now. We'll see if you can pick which is which. And of course, Trent gave away the obvious clue at the top that I missed when I put this out there. Yes, it was a trick question, not very tricky. They're all AI-generated cats, right? Like there's not a real one in there. Let's do another picture. Let's see if you can pick out which one's AI and which one is actually a real picture. Any guesses? Yeah, how many think the one on the left? The girl on the left, right? How many think the guy on the right? Yeah. Those that said the guy on the right, you got it right. Yeah, that's the AI-generated image. Let's do one more. Who do you think is a picture of the real person, the real guy, or AI-generated version? Right. How many think left? How many think right? Yeah, it's the right. Again, it's the right one. Yeah. Again, just trying to get you to see, it can be hard to tell the difference. And again, why I bring this up is because faith used to be defined as believing in what you can't see, but now you're going to need faith. How many know to believe what you even can see? that deep fake video, that AI generated image, that news article you read. You're going to have to apply faith to what traditionally has been held as evidence. And again, this is where I say that science and faith, they need each other. As the truth is, how many know a faith that can't be tested can't be trusted? A faith that can't be tested can't be trusted. And which brings us to kind of what I want to kind of approach this and how I want to talk about this for the rest of our time together as we're going to put our faith kind of to the test today. As we're going to kind of test, just specifically the kind of arguments or the reality, the truth of the existence of God. We're going to put it through kind of a scientific test. And I will pre-warn you, nothing I'm going to say today is going to end up like on the headlines of CNN or Fox News, like, hey, somebody in Oregon finally answered all these, deep questions. God is really real. But I do think it's going to help. And I think it's going to, my hope is that this actually fuels your faith in the process. And so to do this, to kind of run the existence of God specifically through kind of this test of science, we're going to look at it through this lens of scientific method known as Occam's razor. How many of you had that on your sermon notes bingo card? That we were going to be talking about that today. But for those unfamiliar with this, Occam's razor is this theory. It's a way of sifting through logical fallacies. In fact, it was actually first developed by William Occam back in the 16th century. And Occam's razor is really just this premise that the simplest theory and the one is really the one with the least number of assumptions is usually the correct explanation. The one with the least number of assumptions is usually the correct explanation. And important to note that whether you realize it or not, you're using Occam's razor all the time. Multiple times throughout your day, you're using Occam's razor to filter through what is actually true or not true. Like you use it whenever you have that friend who maybe is always late to the job or late to showing up when they said that they would be there on time, only for them to be like, you're not going to believe it. But I hit like every red light. And when I was driving, like part of the highway fell in. And then I saw this elderly person who needed help getting across the road. So I stopped and I helped them get across the road. And that's why I'm late. Now, how many know, like I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, we live on the Oregon coast. Part of the road does fall in at times, right? But it's probably not likely. Like what's the more likely one? The one with the least number of assumptions that they just got off to a late start. Or maybe if you're a parent and your kid, you're asking your kid, man, why is your room so messy? And they come back with, you're not going to believe it. But like I saw the lightning bolt and the windows opened up and there was a windstorm and blew open all the laundry in my room and went everywhere and food particles and it's just a mess. I mean, I guess it's possible, but is it likely? No. What's the more likely answer? Is that they probably haven't cleaned up their room in like 6 months. See, the reason why they call it Occam's razor is because the razor was meant to shave off the assumptions. It's saying that those assumptions, they need to be cut away so you can see things more clearly as to what is really happening. And so when it comes to the existence of God, that's really what I want us to do today. We're going to kind of shave away some of the assumptions to get to the reality. By first starting by taking a look at the creation of everything. If we're really going to put it to the test, we got to start with the creation of everything. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, speaking of collaboration and science and faith not being either or, but both and, we see how science has in the past 100 years come to discover and confirm what the Bible's been trying to say the last 3,000 years in describing what is commonly referred to as the Big Bang Theory. Right? Like, and when, again, not to take you back to the PTS Dave science class, but I think most of us are at least somewhat familiar with this, where this idea of countless years ago, there being this swirling ball of mass and energy and particles, and all of a sudden just exploded and created all the universe and the worlds and the life we know today. And in a way, I agree with that, because that's exactly what the Bible says. That there was a beginning. There's a beginning to creation. And of course, in the Big Bang Theory, they go on to describe, there was this huge explosion, this big flash of light. Again, I agree with that. It's interesting enough because my Bible says something very similar. Genesis 1:3 says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw the light was good, separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So 2 for 2, right? No disagreements here. But here's where science falls off and the Bible continues. Because it answers a question that rarely ever gets asked in science class. In fact, it's this question that actually first was posed by a guy by the name of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. In fact, I think we got a picture of this guy. Watch out, ladies. He's a real looker. In fact, I've been telling Holly, I think I want to do my hair like that guy. But this guy, he actually was the first to really ask this question of where did the thing that started the thing actually come from? In fact, he actually says it this way. He says, we debate how creation is as it is, but we never talk about why creation is. We debate how, the biology, everything, and everything else. We put so much study and effort into that, but we never look at why there is a universe to begin with. And again, it's this question that he poses, and I think it's this question that if we really hope to peel back the layers, we've got to ask, which is, why is there something and not nothing? Just from a scientific level, how many know that nothing can't make something? Like nothing always leads to nothing. So that being the case, and then how? How did the nothing, create these balls of gas that ultimately led to the Big Bang Theory? And of course, actually science most recently has tried to answer this question. And of course, the leading scientific theory as to why there is something out of nothing comes from a guy by the name of Neil Krauss, who wrote a book in 2012. And he said that it was a combination of gravity, the quantum vacuum, and phantom particles. Now, let's hang out on that third one for just a second. Phantom particles. Think about that for a second. If I give you a phantom dollar, Do you have $1? Like, you never paid me back. Yes, I did. I gave you a phantom 20. Come on. And again, that's where we got to run it through this process of Occam's razor. What's the most likely explanation for that? When you pull back the layers, how do you get something from nothing? Unless, catch this, there was already a something there that needed nothing to begin with. A something there, or maybe better said, a someone there who needed nothing to begin with. See again, it's this reality that there's a God. In fact, this is actually, the theological term for this is the ex nihilo of God. It's actually what separates God. It's one of the characteristics that makes God God, is this ability to do what man can never do, which is to make something out of nothing. Which, by the way, should really encourage you on just a simply practical level to know that we serve a God who specializes in making something out of nothing. That it doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how much fame you have, it doesn't matter how overwhelming of a situation you're in. It doesn't matter. Listen, maybe you're in a place where you come in here where it feels like you got nothing left to give when it comes to that marriage. Maybe you feel like you have nothing left that you can do when it comes to that job or financial situation. Or maybe the doctors have told you there's nothing more that they can do given your current medical situation. You need to know we serve a God who specializes and is amazingly good at making something from nothing. Making something from nothing. And I'm telling you, if you'll just learn to give your whatever feels like nothing to him or a little thing to him, just watch what he does. Just watch what he'll do. In fact, this is kind of the beauty when it comes to seeing God show up in our lives, is that the only thing you got to do to see God show up in miraculous ways in your life is simply to be available. Not talented, not gifted, not even qualified, just available. Saying, God, I need you. I need you to do what I know I can't do, but only you can do, which is to make something from nothing. Which brings us to something else. If we're going to really kind of run it through, kind of our faith through this test of Occam's razor, we also got to look at actually what is defined as the fine-tuned theory by looking at the design of everything. The design of everything and how precise it is, how intricate it is. Listen, I'm telling you, when you really get into the details of it all, it's hard, if not impossible, to come away with any other conclusion that there was a designer behind it all. Psalm 19, 1-2 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. I want to show you a picture of a famous landmark. You might recognize this, Stonehenge. And this is actually a picture of the real one, not the copycat one in the Columbia River Gorge. Anyone seen the fake one? It's kind of cool, right? But now, here's the thing. Now, while there's a lot of arguments as to like when this was constructed, who actually constructed it, how many know what there is no argument or discussion or conflict about is that this was built by somebody. Like somebody had a hand, like it didn't just happen. Like there was never a point where like Mr. Stonehenge walked by it and just looks at it and goes, man, how did that get here? Boy, talk about an amazing storm to throw these 2-ton stones right on top of each other. Like what a coincidence, how crazy is that? No, there's no arguments over the fact that when you just look at it by its design, you know that somebody had a hand in putting this all together. Which, by the way, side note, speaking of science collaborating with faith, you see the kind of this perfect circle that it's kind of formed in. Interesting enough, do you realize that you will never find a perfect circle in nature? You'll never find a perfect circle in nature. Every circle you see that's perfectly in the shape of a circle was either someone drew it or someone designed it or someone made it. Because there are certain things that, I'm telling you, don't just happen by accident. They require someone's hand to be involved in it. On top of it, have you ever thought about not just what it looks like, when it comes to who created all this, but also like what it takes to maintain all of this, to keep the world going? Like everything that's required to maintain life on this planet. I remember talking with Sharon, and who was helping out with this sort of bee enthusiast gathering some months ago. And I don't study bees. I'm typically too busy running from them. But I was asking her about it, and she actually did share some really interesting things I didn't know. And without kind of going into all the science of it, all the details, let's just say, did you know that if tomorrow no more bees were around, that eventually life as we know it would cease to exist for us? Like they play a vital part in sort of the circle of life, if you will. And again, it's amazing to me. Like without bees, eventually we'd all die, and just how fragile this ecosystem is. Or how about this? Did you know that if the earth tilted on its axis just a little bit, we would lose our seasons? And because there would be no more winter and no more spring, how many know that would also mean there's no more harvest and ultimately no more food? And what happens? Yeah, we all die. Or how about this? Do you know that if the earth spin just 10% faster, the whole earth would be flooded? And again, any guesses what happens to us out there? Yeah, we die, right? Or how about this one? If the earth was just 1% closer to the sun, the earth would burn up. And again, any guesses of what happens to us? Yeah, we die. If the earth was just 1% further from the earth, we'd freeze. And again, what happens to us? Yeah, you're right. We'd be dead. See, it's amazing me to think that just one of these 150 constants in relation to how this planet operates and keeps going and keeps moving, that if just one of them stopped or just one of them gets out of order, everything we know would cease to exist. And so here's my question, because the reality is if you look at nature and see one of those things happen, that like that's just one thing. Like maybe you could chalk it off as just sort of random coincidence. But to look around this world and see just the amazing detail and order and connection, how every seed, every raindrop, every molecule, every degree placement on this earth, like it matters. It plays an intricate role in everything. It's hard to look at that and come up with any other conclusion that, man, there's a designer behind it all. That there's someone who has his hand in it all. In fact, there was an atheist scientist that added up the probability of all this happening by chance and all these elements coming together, and this was the number that he came up with. And it's a number, it equates to 10 billion to the 123rd power of just all this happening by chance, all this happening by accident. And again, mind you, this is a scientist who's not a believer, right? But this is the number he came up with. In fact, to put this in perspective, the chance of all this just happening by coincidence would mean that you have a better chance, get this, of winning the lottery 10,000 times in a row, and every time you cash your ticket, you get struck by lightning. Like that in practical terms, that's the odds. And again, you say we have faith because we believe that God created this, that there's a designer behind it all. I don't know. And again, by the way, might I add this? I don't know about you, but this encourages me a whole lot, especially given the time and the season that we live. Listen, when was the last time that you actually worried about the rotation of the earth? Like woke up at 3 a.m. in a dead sweat, like, oh my goodness, I feel like the earth moved. Like, are we 1% closer to it? Like it's over. No, you don't worry about that. You're not worried about that because you know deep down, whether you're a believer or not, I think we all have this sense inside of us all that there's a God who's in control of it all. And so let me ask you, listen, if we won't worry about that, let me put it in more practical terms. Why would we worry about who wins the election? Don't get me wrong, you should get out and vote, you should play your part. But if your guy doesn't win or your girl doesn't, him off the throne. We still serve a God who's large and in charge, right? You can trust him to hold it all together even when this world maybe feels like it's all falling apart. On top of it, we all know how it ends as well. If you were here last weekend, you know that Jesus comes back, right? Sets it all back right again. So vote, it's important, but don't stress about it. When you know that we serve a God who is in control, we got a designer who's got a plan and a purpose and a promise behind it all. Now, I want to end with this, with the time we got left, because I think, when it comes to kind of running the existence of God through this kind of method of Occam's razor, peeling back the layers of assumptions, I think, just as important as looking at the existence of God from a scientific perspective in terms of the creation of everything, the design of everything, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't also talk about the Lord over everything. The Lord over everything. Like when we talk about the existence of God, like we got to talk about, the Word becoming flesh in Jesus, right? The Son of God. And the very thing, that really our whole faith is built upon, and specifically the resurrection of Jesus. Did you know that Christianity is the only falsifiable religion in the world? And you might be wondering sort of what that means. Well, the Bible, you got to understand, makes a lot of historical claims. It adds a lot of dates, specific dates and locations and names. And look, if you could find one artifact that disproves the historical claim in the Bible, you would then falsify the Bible. And how many know for thousands of years people have been trying, right? People have been trying, only to struggle to ever find that smoking gun to discount it all. In fact, it might help to explain why Paul is able to say what he does in 1 Corinthians 15:14. He says, "And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." Sometimes my boy will be playing basketball, and when I'm kind of getting the better of him, he'll remind me, he goes, "Hey, I got receipts." And what he's saying in that moment is, "Hey, remember, let me remind you of the times I've taken it to you, the times I've scored on you." And in many ways, I think that's what Paul is saying here as well. Is the reason Paul was able to say what he does with such confidence, with such boldness, is because he's got receipts to back up this claim that Jesus is who he says he was and did what he said he'd do. As we want to quickly share what is actually known, oftentimes referred to as the 5 facts. And these are our 5 facts that hopefully will kind of help to just encourage you and be some receipts for you when it comes to faith in Christ. And this is interesting. These are 5 facts that, interesting enough, they don't just come from Christian academic sources, but these are also secular sources as well. But they're all kind of facts that we can all agree upon. Which, fact number 1 is that Jesus lived, right? I think we can all agree with that. Whether you're a believer in Jesus or not, we can all agree Jesus lived. As there isn't a reputable historian in the world who would debate that. There's too many artifacts, too many stories, too many documented eyewitness accounts. There's just too much evidence. As oftentimes I'll hear people say, "Do you believe in Jesus?" Which, when you think about it, is kind of a ridiculous question. As if Jesus is like the Tooth Fairy or Bigfoot. As if there was a question about his existence. When the truth is, catch this, there's actually more historical evidence for the existence of Jesus than Julius Caesar. Can you imagine walking into a history class? Professor's like, "Hey, we're going to talk about Julius Caesar," and you're like, "I don't believe in that guy." Right? You wouldn't do, that's crazy. Not to mention the fact you do really bad in that class. And again, it might surprise you. No, there's more evidence, there's more facts for the existence of Jesus than any other living person on this planet. Which, number 2, we also know he died. Jesus died, and not just any death, but given historical reports, not just from the gospel accounts, but even secular sources of the day, we know that he died by crucifixion, this incredibly painful, bloody death. But here's the third one, and whether you believe Jesus rose from the dead or not, here's what you cannot deny, is that the tomb was empty. The tomb was empty. Now, again, you can have some different ideas and theories around what led to that tomb being empty, but look, what there's no debate about was that the tomb was empty. And we know this for a couple of reasons. First off, nowhere in the gospel accounts or historical writings from the day do we ever see religious leaders or Roman officials deny that the tomb was empty. Now, we may see them try to explain it away or try to find some way to kind of cover it up, but nowhere will you read of someone from that day deny that the tomb was empty. Secondly, the tomb was built in Jerusalem. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was going to build a tomb somewhere and then try to make up some claim that someone resurrected from it, I don't think that I would put that person in a tomb that's in the middle of a metropolitan area. like, where would you pick it? Like, you'd pick like way out in the woods, way out in the middle of nowhere, way in the boonies where no one could, really check out your claim. And so we know the tomb was empty, but here's something else, is we also have a lot of evidence to support the fact that Jesus appeared to a lot of people. Resurrected Jesus appeared to a lot of people. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 15:6. And speaking of after the resurrection, says, Jesus appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living. In other words, Paul's like, I got receipts. You want to doubt me on it? Hey, go talk to Bob down the street, right? Or go talk to Jim down the road. Like they'll tell you. And on top of it, look what he goes on to say. He says, then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also. Now, I want to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of James in particular. The same James who would go on to write the book of James, a half-brother of Jesus for a moment, and ask yourself, what would it take for you to be convinced that your brother was the Son of God? In fact, it might have to explain why James was a skeptic for most of Jesus' earthly ministry. Like, I know everyone says he's the Son of God, and mom's always telling me he's perfect, and why can't you be more like your brother Jesus? Like, I get that, but I'm struggling to see it. Because all I see is a kid that I was playing in the sandbox with and building furniture and chairs with. Like, that's all I see. Only for something to happen that changed it all for James, who would go from a skeptic to one of the fiercest proponents and evangelists of the gospel message. Which brings us to the last one. Fact number 5 is that his followers were willing to die for all this. Check this out. Andrew, this is just a list of his disciples, right? Andrew was crucified for his faith. Bartholomew was skinned alive, then crucified. James was beheaded. Another James was thrown from the top of the temple, then stoned to death. John, who we talked about last week, they tried to kill him, but because they couldn't do it, they just isolated him to an island of Patmos. Jude was beaten with a club. Matthew was staked and speared to the ground. Peter was crucified upside down. Philip was tortured and hung upside down. Simon was crucified, then sawed in half. Thomas was speared to death, and Matthias was stoned and beheaded. So often it's like, man, it'd be so cool to be able to walk with Jesus, to be like one of his disciples. I don't know. You look at that, like, that's a pretty rough ending. Now, think about this. If all this was just some story they made up or a figment of their imagination, why go through all of that? Like when Holly and I were trying to get the truth out of Austin, like all we got to do is threaten him with like withholding his phone for like 24 hours. And it's amazing how he just spills his guts instantly. He's like, all right, I'll tell you the whole thing, right? And yet these guys, under the threat of literally being sawed in half, the threat of being boiled alive, refused to recant the fact that I know what I saw. I know what Jesus did in my life. If I could add one more fact to this, and maybe the most important fact of all is, listen, the reason we know that Jesus is alive, the reason we know that Jesus exists, is not simply because of the work he did back then, but the work he's still doing now. As we end this and conclude this, I want to share a story of someone here in our congregation who I think really shares this really well, of God who is alive and working just as much today as he did back then. Take a look at this.
My name is Brian, and back in March of 2024, this year, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma. When I first was diagnosed with that, I was really devastated because I didn't know what was going to happen next, how long I had to live, if I was going to die, what was going to happen. I'm like, why me? I lost my mom from cancer, my grandmother from cancer, my uncle from cancer, so it was running in my family anyway. But, me being only 65 years old, I'm coming up on 66 in December, you know, and I'm finally being blessed with grandkids. You know, I don't have any kids of my own, but, you know, I treat them as my own, and they love me and they respect me, you know, my wife's kids. And, you know, to me, that's something special. And the two special ones, the most special ones, is Penelope and Jubal. Penelope's 11 and Jubal's 8. They live up in Washington, and we go up there in the summertime, bring one of them down for 2 weeks, take them home, and then come grab the other one and bring them down so they can spend time down here. They love it down here. They love Grandpa. I'm the only living Grandpa. So, you know, that means a lot to me too. And, you know, when I got diagnosed with that, it hit me hard that, you know what, now they're gonna not have a Grandpa at all. I guess, you know, when I first reached out for his help, I felt his hand pick me up, lift me up. And I mean, even before I was diagnosed, I think when I was here for Christmas, and I cried hard. And I felt it in my heart that, you know what, and I asked, you know, then, you know, Jesus, you know, carry me through whatever, you know, hardships that I'm going through. Because even before this medical stuff was going on, 3 years ago, which I won't get into too much, but I had an incident, you know, it put a toll on me too. And just dealing with that, it was anger, a lot of anger. And I think that's what brought me to the church, was the anger that, you know, I had, and I was venting, and I was doing this in the wrong way. And then when I came to the church and asked God to help me, and for Jesus to help me and carry me through the hard times, I think that's when everything started to change. But then, like, okay, then when I got diagnosed with a cancer, I thought, well, now what? You know, because I'd already gone through this thing for like 5 years, and then finally we get that taken care of, and, you know, that's off my plate now. Okay, what is everything going to be okay? Yeah, it was okay for a couple of years, and then next thing I know, something else happened, which is the cancer. The doctor told me, well, if you wouldn't have got here when you did, he said, you would have been gone within about 6 weeks. So immediately after they did the biopsy and found out that I did have the cancer, it started radiation right away. Or not radiation, but the chemotherapy. I had 3 infusion sessions, and then he transferred me from that to doing the oral chemotherapy, which is just taking the pills once a day, every day. And 6 months later, I've been told I was in remission, which makes me really happy. Like I said, if it wasn't for me coming to this church, I don't think I'd be here today. I call her my mom. And yeah, Ellen and Nell, you know, both of them, you know, have just been astronomically, you know, helpful, and, you know, everybody's praying, and not just those two, but everybody. You know, I've been going to the Wednesday night Bible studies, and then I came into church this last weekend, and a lot of people didn't know, you know, the news, and some of them didn't, but they were really amazed and happy for me, and said that they would continue to pray for me. And I pray every morning and every night before I go to bed and thank the Lord, you know, for another day. I don't know. I never used to be like this, and this has just totally changed my life. But I'm just grateful that, you know what, there is a God.
It's a great picture of how faith and science collaborate, right? But also, you know, what I loved about is just the honesty of it. As, you know, it can be easy to kind of hear messages like this, like, that's great, Pastor, but I still got doubts. And listen, if that's you, welcome to the club, right? Like that's a part of faith. And in fact, this might surprise you to know that listen, I don't think that, you know, so often we try to view doubt as sort of the absence of faith, when in reality, I think it's actually the entrance to faith. The question isn't whether you have doubt or not, it's what you do with that doubt. Are you allowing it to keep you home, or are you allowing it to draw you to Jesus? And so, in fact, I want to challenge you with this as we wrap this up, with, you know, to kind of take on the ultimate experiment. Again, a faith that isn't tested can't be trusted. And so I want to encourage you to put faith to the test. Put faith to the test. Maybe you're in a situation that just seems like, man, you got nothing. You feel so hopeless and you feel like you've run out of all the options. Hey, listen, put him to the test. He's not going to fail you. He's going to show up and do what only he can do. If you're willing to just cry out to him, to surrender to him, to give it over to him. And for some of you, I want to encourage you too, to also take sort of the ultimate experiment and test. And I encourage you to commit to be a part of a faith community, a church community, whether it's this one, we'd love for it to be this one, or, good Bible believing community out there. But man, to commit for just a year, I'm gonna put this thing to the test. And I'm telling you, just watch what God does, how he grows you, how he stretches you, much like Brian's story, how he shows up in ways that when you look at it and you see it, you can't help but go, man, only God could have done that. Only God could have worked that way. Look, I want to pray for you today. And again, I don't know what fears, what worries, what doubts maybe you come in here with. But here's what I know, is that when you have the courage to surrender what maybe even feels like you got nothing to give, but just to give what you have, messiness and all, fear and all, worry and all, when you give it over to God, listen, what I'm telling you, I promise you what you're going to come to find is that we serve a God who specializes in making something out of nothing. And so, yeah, I know it feels like you got nothing more you can give to that marriage. I know maybe it feels like you got nothing left to do in terms of options in relation to that job situation or that financial situation. I know that maybe the doctors have told you there's nothing left they can do. Listen, when you're at that place, it can be so easy to just sort of live in the doubts and to live in the skepticism. But I want to challenge you to step out in faith and put it in God's hands and just watch what he does and watch how he shows up and watch how he does the miraculous in your life. In fact, I want to pray for one more person here in this room. And maybe it's a person who, again, you've never experienced the reality of Jesus for your life. You've never, accepted that invitation to receive this gift of life, not just life eternal, but life abundant. And again, it is just that, it's a receiving. You can't earn it, you can't work for it, it's simply receiving it by his amazing grace. And listen, how you do that is just simply a prayer of surrender. Saying, God, I recognize I've messed up more than a few times, but I believe in a God who loved me enough to leave heaven, to come to earth, to die on a cross, to pay a price for all my sin, all my shame, past, present, future. And because of that, Jesus, I ask you to come into my life right now and to be the Lord and Savior of my life. I'm putting my faith and my trust in my life. I'm giving it all over to you. I'm putting it in you, Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.